going to do a roll call quick, so please indicate if you're here. Erin Moran is running late. She'll be here though. Nyla Fry.
Here.
Randy Gutenberg, absent. Mary Heimbecker.
Here.
Sam Kaufman.
Here.
Mary Ellen.
Here.
Adam Kreisman.
Here.
Pat Molly.
Here. Zoom within minutes.
Robert McPherson is on the computer here shortly. Michelle Nell.
Here.
Maria Pat.
Here.
Hannah Russell.
Here.
Helen Schaff.
Here.
Ashley. Absent. Jeff's here. Susan. Absent. Karen Von Hune is absent.
She's sick. She indicated she's
Tom Wilson. Brad Zeman is absent. And one of our members, Tiffany Clark, had some health issues with her family, and she actually ended up having to move out of Waunakee. So she sent an email a couple days ago indicating that she was going to have to withdraw, so she has moved already, actually. So we lost a member. Other than that, we're ready to go.
We're ready to go. We're ready to go. And Mary has, Robert said, do we want to just put him on speakerphone?
Sure.
Okay.
Because he's not responding to my text.
Okay. All right. As soon as we're done with the introduction, then I will follow up with him and get him on while you're beginning things. All right. So what are we doing today? What did you think of? Should I use the microphone? Actually, can you guys hear me well? I can hear you. I've got a loud voice.
all the back of the church.
Yeah, everyone is in the back of the church. It's like when I go to church, to the back. What do you think of last month's meeting? Good? Yeah? All right, we got a lot to talk about today. So this is our agenda basically for the day. Typically we go over kind of what we've been doing. I'm going to skip most of that today just because I think we want to reserve as much time as possible for discussion. But according to the agenda you got, our goals today are going to be to determine the target number of housing units and discuss income range. Second, make some policy recommendations or start making some policy recommendations. Third, identify some strategies for financing development options. And then fourth, we'll talk about what we need in terms of community input. So with community input, that brings us to the survey, which we can kind of technically consider old business even though it's ongoing. We've got 3 different surveys. 2 of them are active right now. The commuter survey is quietly active. I haven't pushed that towards businesses yet, simply because we're focused on the resident survey. We have 513 responses so far, which is pretty good. It will get even better than that. We have the youth grades 7 through 12 survey that will probably be going out in the next couple of weeks. We'll do our very first big data poll on May 2nd, 3rd, 4th, about a week and a half before our next meeting. And that's where we'll look at the bulk of the responses that we've gotten. I will keep the survey up and open for months at a time so that we can track how responses evolve over time. And that allows people in the community, as they hear about the project, as they see it in the paper, as recommendations are presented, to take the survey if they haven't had a chance to take it already. So that brings us to, do you guys have anyone express concerns about the survey or questions? I got a couple, and I'll just go over those. Yeah, Nyla.
Okay. I guess I was mistaken. I thought that people who did not live in town any longer, who wanted to move to town, but could do the survey, and now I'm kind of being told that that's not what it's about.
Yeah, so they will get put into the commuter survey. So if you take the opening few pages of the survey, one of the very first questions is, do you live in Waunakee? If you answer yes to that, you get directly into the resident survey. If you say you live in the district, we ask that. You also go directly to the resident survey. If you say no, you do not live in Waunakee or you commute, then you get put over to the commuter survey. And the commuter survey differs in that it asks a little bit more about price sensitivity for the type of home somebody might be looking for, the type of rent they're looking for, where we don't really ask that directly for the resident survey because presumably people are already living in Waunakee for that one.
Okay, so then somebody that I'm doing childcare for who lives in Sudbury but wants to move to Waunakee, that's the one she takes. That's the direction she takes.
And if you send her the resident link, she'll automatically get funneled into that commuter survey.
Okay.
And one of that, it'll ask, and then the commuter survey is going to collect data in 2 ways. So if you work in Waunakee, you'll check that box. and then we'll understand who works here, and then if you don't work in Waunakee, you'll check that box. You don't get pushed into a different part of the survey, which is a change from the resident survey, but then we've got an idea of who's actually actively working here and who's outside of the community and commuting and maybe for other reasons.
Okay, there's one instance where somebody actually is not a resident here, they want to be a resident here, but they're working here. So should they go to the commuter?
Yeah, if they get into that resident portal, they'll automatically get funneled into that if they say they work in Waunakee Adults here.
Village site?
It is, it's on the village site. It is linked on a couple of different Facebook pages. We're going to start pushing out probably Monday or Tuesday of next week geographically targeted Facebook advertisements where we're doing paid promotion. So when you, it's unbelievably inexpensive to do this, but then when you pull up your Facebook page, whether or not you've been connected to the village in any way in terms of having liked a Facebook page or connected to a neighborhood page or whatever page might have included the link. You won't need to do that if you're geographically identified as a Waunakee resident or you're geographically in the area and Facebook can identify your location. At the time that we're running the ad, it'll prompt you to take the survey. So we'll get another wave of people that way. So it was in the paper last week. We had a nice big write-up in the paper. We'll continue to put notices in the paper over the next couple of weeks of smaller ones as well.
So what you just said is
Yes.
that there'll be another wave of social media
Yeah.
coming out that
Yes.
you can latch on to.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
definitely. I did get some concerns from a couple of different people who took the survey or have heard that you can take it multiple times. You can take it multiple times. I know when you do that. We have 2 different ways that we typically organize surveys. And one of them is I check a box in the software, no matter what software we use, there's usually this box that says prevent ballot box stuffing. And that limits 1 response per IP address. And since IP addresses are linked most commonly to your home server, your home modem, and most of us only have 1 of those at home, that means that only 1 adult can take a survey in a household. Well, adults can live together and have very different opinions, so I didn't check it for this particular survey. So you can go in there and take the survey multiple times. When that happens, one of 2 things occurs in Qualtrics, which is the survey software that we're using. The first one is it flags any response that comes from, and more than 1 response, from an single IP address over a 12-hour period of time. It flags it as spam if the responses are sufficiently statistically similar as to indicate that they might have been taken by the same person. So that's the first way. Qualtrics flags that, and then we look at it. Now, it could be that 2 people living together have almost identical opinions. So I then go back and I look at those 2 responses and see if it seems reasonable. If it seems reasonable that they're 2 different people, we keep it in. The other way that we do it is we check IP addresses. The only possible identifying information that's ever caught by Qualtrics is the IP address. I don't know how to, many people who do know how to track an IP address to an actual physical address, so it doesn't qualify as identifying information, but we can look at different IP addresses and see when they're taking it. I'll get an IP address, and then next to that there'll be the time that a survey was started, the time it was ended, and then I can sort by that IP address. If there's more than 1 response, we can see if people are taking it sequentially. And if there's only a few second break, or we see several, 10, 20 responses from a single IP address that isn't the high school, where you have a computer lab, or the library, where there's a computer lab, then we know to flag those responses. So I've been doing that manually. And then before we analyze the data and look at any of the results, those IP addresses get discarded. So yeah, so those 2 things have been happening. If you do hear people say, and I hear reports that they're saying in chat rooms and whatnot, I've not actually seen any evidence of it, you can go in and you can take it multiple times. If you hear somebody say that, say, you probably don't want to do that because your address is going to get flagged and then your responses are going to get thrown out.
How many have you picked up on? Any?
We have 8 identified spam addresses right now, which is actually quite a low number. And I've been kind of carefully examining the IP addresses. I haven't made it all the way through. And I'll look at the IP addresses occasionally, but until we get that final number on the 1st, 2nd week of May, then I won't really go through and pull them. I can't take those off the server now without disrupting the survey.
I was going to say the only issue with that is sometimes you may have different generations living in a household, and then one's trying to move out or whatever, and
Yeah.
so that, you know,
Yeah, so if I see multiple responses from a single IP address, that doesn't eliminate them, but I will look at it if one of the signature tags of people taking it again and again is that there's like only a 3 or 4 second delay between the end of one survey and the start of another. So they go through the survey and then they go back and they start again. I can tell this because I take surveys multiple times when I'm testing them, and I can always see my responses. Like when I'm testing it, that's me, so I don't record my own responses, but I'm going through looking for all the flubs. So that's, it takes more than 3 or 4 seconds to hand off a computer, so just kind of carefully monitor that stuff. And that's kind of normal survey practice, but yeah.
How many responses did you say?
513.
Okay, so the Capillary Regional Planning Commission did a survey.
Yeah.
The Greater Madison Division, and they had 941.
Yeah.
For months it was out. So
Yeah.
that's not too bad for
That's
just,
really good. Yeah.
a local survey.
Yeah. And part of it's driven by, I've done surveys similar to this, not necessarily just on housing, but in communities, and part of it is driven by the fact that it is Waunakee specific, and it's typically posted and circulated by neighbors, and when you send emails out to friends in Waunakee, they're really going to think about taking a survey.
Do we know if the school district sent out?
Not yet,
To
no.
They were going to send it to their
Yeah.
admin.
Yeah, so we've
But
been.
they have not done that.
They have not done that yet, so we're gonna see another wave come in, and they'll send it out at the same time, they say the 7th through 12th. I wanted it to be out there for a couple of weeks and make sure it was working really well before. The school district will be one of our big pushes, and before we advertise, I wanna make sure that nothing's going wrong.
are the paper copies available yet?
Yeah, so up in the senior center, they just went out yesterday. It was partially my fault. I was out of the office last week. So they're in the senior center, they are at the village center, and then they're at the library.
And Village Hall.
Yeah.
And
Oh, Village Hall.
Village
Village Hall,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. So and there's a
Can I
nice
steal some
red
stickers?
box. Yes, you can. Yeah, if you want some. I can run some specially over.
We had a few people actually
Yeah, I need
ask
that
if
too.
Westport now.
Perfect.
Why?
That's all right.
Because we help, that might be one of the reasons. I think our office assistant actually helped a couple of people, so
Yeah.
it might come through our
Yeah. But she wouldn't, it's really clear when people are different, yeah. Yeah, it's really, really clear. So yeah, they're relatively easy to pick up once you start looking at it. But I did put a PowerPoint slide together. You guys know I love PowerPoint slides. It was hard not to. I do have some like really early indicators. You guys want to hear about those?
Yes, sure.
Right. So 86% of our respondents so far are from the village, 9% from the school district. When we ask, why did you move to Waunakee out of a 7-point scale, the number one reason we'd all guess it would be schools. That got a 6.26 out of 7. I have never seen a school district rated that high, as highly as a reason to move in all of the communities that I've done this. Now it's only like 10, but still, that's pretty impressive. Cost of house was the second most highly rated reason. That was 4.96. Size of house, 4.86, and taxes, 4.71. 86% of respondents said that we watch out for one another in Waunakee. It feels pretty good to hear that. 61% said, which is a higher number than I normally see, say that we work together to solve our community problems. So if people are viewing housing as an issue, this is definitely something consistent with that. 69% of folks say we welcome new residents, so I thought that was very positive. 96%, that's the highest number I've ever seen for this particular item, say we're a good place for families. 86% say we're a good place for adults. 60% say we're a good place for seniors, so some room for improvement, maybe with some of the work we're doing here. 16% say we're a good place for folks with limited income. So again, maybe an indication that there's a perception that what we're doing is important or needed. When we asked people, would you use income-targeted housing? To date, 1 in 5 respondents said that yes, they would use income-targeted housing for those $60,000 to $70,000 a year in that range. 1 in 4 say they would use income-targeted housing for $70,000 to $80,000 as a range, and 1 in 3 said that they would use income-targeted housing for $80,000 to $90,000 in range, targeting those incomes. So the idea that there's not a need for affordable housing or a need for income-targeted housing is maybe counteracted by some of the information that we're getting with this. 2 in 5 folks say that sometime in the future they see themselves needing senior housing. 17% of respondents said that they sometime do see themselves as needing limited income housing. 13% said that they would need, at some point in time, housing for someone with a physical disability in their household, and 8% said that at some point in time they do see themselves needing housing for a member of the family with a mental disability. And 1 in 4 of those that identified some sort of accessibility related needs, so senior, physical disability or whatnot, said they anticipate that need within the next 10 years. So yeah, some numbers, those are early numbers, those numbers will change, but that's a pretty good early indication of kind of what people are thinking about in terms of their own needs and in terms of their sentiment towards the community. So yeah, there we go. There we go. You guys ready to talk? Yeah? I'll hand it over to Sharon. Okay.
Kristen.
Yes. Ah, thank you. Yes.
So, the rest of today is you guys talking, making decisions, debating, really figuring out what is this task force going to recommend. And so I just wanted to remind everyone, we have these working agreements, and we have this one bullet. It says we will share all relevant information in order to make the best decisions possible. And throughout the course of the last couple of meetings, we've been trying to share information. We might have shared some irrelevant information. Hopefully it was funded, received, but we've tried to present information that will be useful in coming up with decisions. But with that said, we realize there's some gaps in what we know. We don't know at this point what's feasible to do because we don't have a lot of information about the cost of doing something, about what developers might be willing to do, things about what parcels of land are available. So I ask you to bear with that lack of information and to tag it. If there's some decision that, or a recommendation you want to make that needs more information, we'll put that up as part of the recommendation. It will say something like, we need more recommendation about X, Y, or Z. So we're building primarily off of Kurt Paulson's presentation, and he's the guy from Middleton who was really involved in the Middleton Task Force. He was also the author of the Dane County Housing Needs Assessment, and he presented some really good numbers for us. So we're going to start with that question of, is there a target number of units that this task force would like to recommend that the village try to meet that are in some way affordable or affordable to a particular segment of the population? So there's a number of questions in there. There's the number of, what does affordable mean? What income range? There's the question of, is there a target number that you'd like to suggest? Is there a range? Middleton used a range starting with a low number of 295 based on rental numbers of how many people were at 30% AMI in Middleton currently who were not in sufficient housing. It was the gap number. So you could use that model. You could use other models. So here's what I'm going to have you do. You guys have been studying a lot. You've got all this paperwork. You know the numbers. What I've got up here are 2 different methods to determine the gap, and these were presented by Kurt. And you'll notice that they're pretty small, so this is going to be a stand up, get close to each other, debate kind of exercise. The first is determining housing gap method 1, and it's based on rental units affordable at income levels relative to the number of households. So this is all at 30% area mean income using the revised numbers. These are from the numbers Kurt presented last month, and those were, that was a Dane County housing assessment that was revised. And I'm forgetting the date, but I thought it was 2019, and I'm wondering how could he have done that so quickly, but he might have. For Waunakee, you have 175 renter households with incomes below 30% AMI of Dane County. You have 70 units, rental units available that are affordable at that rate, and you have a gap of 105. That's method number 1. Then you have method number 2, which looks at a subset of households that are called extremely cost-burdened households. And just as a reminder, the term extreme cost burden, on his slides, it said 50% of income is spent on housing. So these are people who live in Waunakee now, who are either owners or renters, your neighbors who are spending over 50% of their income to pay their housing costs. So that's to pay either their mortgage or their rent. That's called extreme cost burden, and it's because it's a number calibrated based on your bucket of expenses. You've got food, housing, electricity, car payments, healthcare, all those things that the federal government long ago said you should not be paying more than 30% of your income on a household. This is a cost burden. And the numbers here, I'm not going to read them, there's owner households at different segments of the population, less than 30, between 30 and 50, and between 50 and 80, and then renter households. So here's what I'm going to charge you to do. I'm going to give everybody a really nice pen, so that it's not a ballpoint, it's a calligraphy pen so that you can see it. And I'm going to have you, I hope I have enough, nope I won't. I'll just share some of these pens. I'm going to have you go up there, and somebody who's been thinking about this a lot, who has some ideas on what they'd like to propose, I'd like you to just make a proposal to your task force, to the rest of your group, of what you think is a reasonable number. It doesn't have to be based on that. You could propose something else and just write it right up there, but that's a starting point. And I don't have enough pens, so I'm going to have you guys all share. All right? Or else if you have a marker type pen, do you have any more marker type pens? Yes.
So you want us to write how many households we think we need?
Yep. I want you to come up here and present your thesis. So you might say, I think our low number should be 105 because that's the gap for using this method. And our high number should be adding all these together. You have to consider this is only households that are in Waunakee right now, right? There's households of people who want to be in Waunakee, who can't afford it. There's future population growth, and there's people who are commuting for work in the workforce. So you might want to ratchet the number up. You might say, well, we've got a limit on how many units we can build, so you might want to ratchet the number down. All I want to see happen is this conversation going on, of people putting forth what they'd like to see.
What we'd like to see, but may not be realistic, or that'll be determined later?
Right, because you can always make a recommendation such as, we would like to see the village add X number of households in this time frame, recognizing that in order to do that, there might be policy changes, ordinance changes, but you want to
The how to get there.
The how to get there we're not doing yet.
Okay.
Yeah, the how to get there is these right here,
Okay.
the next ones, right? I see Tom's headache already with how do you get
Notice I
there?
took my glasses off.
Right. I do it too whenever I can't solve a problem. We recognize if it were easy to do it, you wouldn't have a problem. It would have been done already, right? If it were easy to build affordable housing, we would be doing it all over the country. It's not easy, we recognize that. You also have to keep in mind the character of your community. And we've had numerous conversations about what is it that brings people to Waunakee, what do people want to see? And that's going to be part of the other recommendations of, you may say, because of the character of our community, we would like to recommend incremental growth or slow growth or a type of growth. Those are all options, but you have to keep all these considerations in mind, all right? So I'm going to ask you all to be brave. If nobody can come up with anything, I'm going to make you do an improv exercise, and that's really, really scary. We're doing it 2 doors down, we'll do it in here if nobody can come up with anything. So come on up here. Take a look at the numbers. Somebody who's brave, come up with a proposal. I'll give you
requests for hiring for over a year on their building. Up and down our Main Street, there's constantly hiring. We don't have enough housing for the people who would be at those income limits. I know Norgir hires about $18 to $20 an hour. McDonald's, Kentucky Fried, all those places have help wanted signs. They're $10 or $11 an hour. We don't have housing for people. And if they're working $10 or $11 an hour, they can't afford to drive here either. So if they can't afford to live here, they can't afford to drive here, we're not going to get people in to work at those places. They're always going to be looking for help.
So you're kind of looking into the future thinking, this is our gap now.
This is our gap. If we
but
had
that's just
housing
now.
to fill our gap, we could get people to work at these industries that we want in our town. Service industries. Even out in the industrial park, they have help wanted signs all over the place.
For like the Main Street ones, are those full-time jobs, or do you know if those are part-time jobs? Some of those places probably don't want to hire full-time workers, which may not be.
That I don't know, but
Well, I feel like a significant amount of those people are high school workers, so I don't.
I would not agree with you. Not if you go into those places. They're not high school workers. They're 20-somethings.
Culver's has senior citizens.
Culvers have senior citizens. That's right. And Monday through Friday, they're not going to be high school workers.
And I think that part of the reason we have the jobs that appear to be what used to be high school workers is because many of the high school students do not work.
That's right. Most high school students don't work nowadays.
Yeah.
Or they're limited.
Or they're limited, right? They're so involved with everything else that they don't have time to work. When I was in high school, I did 20 to 30 hours a week. Easy.
Yeah.
But you don't find that anymore.
Where are these rental units in Waunakee?
That number there of 70, I have no idea. I have to be really honest with you.
That's the total though, right?
That's
I
the
bet you
one.
this is probably Lakeview, the place that just had the fire.
So this is affordable at 30% AMI, so there's other units, but they're higher price.
Right.
And these are all rental. Mary, I wanted to ask, are you proposing these be all rental?
No.
Or, okay, so you want to write.
Some smaller homes.
Okay, so can you just write rental plus owner occupied or OO? This, so that's one proposal out there.
That's why it's one where they would be.
Okay.
I know you don't want us to discuss the how
Okay,
or the where.
that's all right.
We are
Just a
going
lot
to
of
discuss.
number.
That's all right.
Right.
We are going to discuss the how, not the where today. We don't have the maps or anything like that, but the how we will get to. But for right now, this is just to get us started. We're not locking anything in stone right now, okay? This is to get things started. So Mary picked a number that's almost 3 times the current gap.
So I would, in one piece Mary said, I would be supportive. The people that are already, we can't find workers that live in Waunakee. We're going to North Madison.
I'm gonna move.
No leaning on the fake wall.
So we can't find, so this includes people who are already in, this number is people already in Waunakee. There are, just like Mary said, there's businesses that, like mine, that need employees, and we can't find them in Waunakee.
You don't have to convince me.
Can't find them in Waunakee. So there is a need to create housing that people can move to Waunakee for that wouldn't be in that 105. I don't know whether 300 is a number, but I think it's something larger than the gap that we have now to fill those jobs.
And how far are we projecting into the future?
We don't know. I don't think there's been set yet, right?
This is up to you guys.
I think
This is up to you
I
guys to decide on.
I think that's a big part of the number.
Okay.
Can I go next?
Mhm.
I think it's important to have owner
Talk to these guys.
households because for the middle class, ownership is one of the biggest investments they have for a family. So if you want financial security for people, they have to have home ownership. I don't know how far we're going, but I'll do the same as Mary did. And I don't know what the possibilities are for people in that low of income to have home ownership. I would hope there would be something, but I'm not putting anything there because I don't know. But if you have a community where people aren't invested in their property, you have issues sometimes. And that's, we should be building for the future and not creating messes for the future, but providing the best outcome that we possibly can.
I'm looking at this number a little differently, and I don't know if anyone else is, but to me, this looks like we're increasing the gap. And my thought is that this number needs to go down, or to be smaller, so that there is less gap, so that we have more people in these categories and don't have as big of a gap. Now, if we're going to start building to deal with this, yes, maybe we will have a gap at one time.
Then she should be right there. She's saying build that one
Okay.
unit, so it should be right there.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's, see, I was
I
reading
get
that
what you're
differently.
saying, yeah.
Because
You
I
can
don't-
cross it off and move it over, because that's what I meant, that we need that many.
Just an arrow.
Yeah,
How's about that?
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
That's just kind of how I was thinking. So the idea, if we keep the gap, but deal with these two numbers, I think that that's almost reasonable. But this is where we need to increase.
Yeah.
And in both of these categories. And we're probably always going to have a gap, and we may decide that it's got to be a percentage of some kind, because as these numbers slide and go up and down, the percentage can stay pretty stable. And there have got to be some things that are being written. I mean, nationwide right now, everyone is looking at affordable housing. I keep seeing things in the newspaper about different articles. The Cap Times had a thing about what is affordability. They talk about transportation, specifically in Madison with their bus system, but it affects us. And everything I'm reading, even in my teaching journals, talk about how do we deal with the issues of race, equity, and so on, and how do we bring people together, and how does a strong school district look at some of those things and make sure that needs are being met for the students. We hear what's going on in Madison schools, and we probably, many of us think, oh my gosh, thank goodness it's not us. But that's not to say that it isn't us in certain areas or somewhere down the road, if we don't make some changes, maybe along in here.
How is 300 enough?
I was just looking at, and
in the short term, maybe?
in the short term, and I mean, it's probably not enough as we grow, but anything to increase the number that we have, and you're right, I wrote that in the wrong spot. I didn't even catch that. Thank you for pointing that out.
But it just seems for rental units that 300, when we've already got that gap now, seems low. Which I can't believe I'm saying, but it does.
So how many do you think we should get?
I don't know.
Well,
Because I think it has a lot to do with, like you're talking about your business, and people that are working in my business are in Waunakee, and I'd like them to be in Waunakee. I'd like them to take advantage of the schools. I'd like to take advantage of all this that we have here, but they're not here. They're maybe North Madison, some Prairie, wherever they might be, and they got to drive to get here, which costs some money. Yours is not the only business like that.
I think
So,
time
like-
is a big factor in this, because if it's 5 years, 10 years, I mean, that's a big fact. The gap can be so much different depending on how much time we're looking at.
Right.
Yeah, that would maybe be the level, our first level in a
It's a first
short-term
shot.
amount of time.
5 years, 10 years. I mean, I think it'd be easier to put together 300, and again, we're not talking about the how or where, but it seems like 300, and I think we're, I don't know, Mary, you put owner occupied, but it seems to be referring to rental. I have this problem with rules. But it seems like it'd be easier to do in Waunakee to find somebody or to be able to help somebody put together 300 rental units in an area that would be able to get to some of the businesses that need them than 200 homes, which maybe we need 200 homes for that group. But this number seems like, for me, doable. I'm looking at you because you put the chart up there. Doable, and something that where we could find assistance somewhere to do it. just don't think it's enough, but.
And I would agree with you. I was just starting with something that I thought we could start with.
I'm going to ask you to put a range in there. Put a high number. And I'm going to ask you to put a box.
A lot.
I don't.
Yeah.
Neela? No. You're Neela. Maureen?
I let Marie.
Maria.
Maria, can you suggest a time frame? Just to get us started. A
I
time
would
frame.
say within the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, there you go.
Okay, so you want
Okay.
the process, let's say the process.
Yeah.
Well,
Given the fact that a process has to get started, and just from watching how things have been going from the village board and plan commission point of view and going to meetings, some things things take time
They
to
take
plan. And so I would say minimally 3 years, but 3 to 5.
okay, I'm pretending it's 2020, so in development by 2023 to 2025, 300 units, both rental and owner occupied, up to, go ahead, 5.
No, I said
600.
there would be in 5 years 300 units to meet some of this demand, because I think there would be demand if they were.
We're always
if they were
behind.
here.
We're always behind.
It's a lot, you know.
Well, the more we build, the more we make, the more people see that there's potential and
Yeah.
possibility. So actually, the gap will probably grow for a while.
Could.
Until we reach a comfortable level.
You know,
where
there's
we
more
can
businesses
slow
coming
things
in all the
down.
time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They're going to be wanting
Yeah.
folks that, you know, maybe are only able to find
They had it.
the housing they want on the,
So-
no, I mean,
Yep.
they're only able to find the housing on the north side of Madison, they gotta come in, you know, we could get a bus. Bus might be cheaper than,
Park in the right place where a bus could, the north side buses are right there.
and I don't know how, it just seems like it's a gap that needs to be filled.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be, if it's done right, to help some of the businesses too, you know, who they might need to work here.
Okay, who's feeling uneasy right now?
Oh, I know.
I'm feeling like this is a lot, but it's something that needs to be done.
I want somebody who's feeling uneasy to express what's difficult about this.
I mean, one of the hard things is just the unknown. So I agree with these numbers and I think they're good, but like what if 300 units go in and, you know, because we don't have bus systems here, that like 100 sit empty just for some unknown, that there's another factor that we don't think about for why people aren't moving here. You know, there's something that goes hand in hand with
That's
the
fear,
housing.
that's fear, that's,
Yeah.
do something and, oh, it might not work.
Yeah.
Which is a good fear to have.
And I think too, like starting with like increments, like, you know, 300, then 600, if something like that were to come up, then it's easier to address and come up, you know, have the need for the bus system to come in to, or address something from there too.
I wonder how this fits in with what the village says they want to allow in terms of new development each year, and only 25% of what it is would be the affordable or the.
And that's where we get to policy options. I did note in the comprehensive plan, there's a limit to new developments.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So if you're talking
Definitely.
about this number for the rental units, then you're up on the number for other types of units, and that's pretty rapid growth.
Well, I would say that in the, like, 4 square blocks that are south of where I am, there's 66 single-family homes just in that small area. And if you're doing 25, what's 25% of 60, 65? 15? No, 20. 20.
17.
So that's just
Good
a
job.
small area. So if you get just a small area and that affords you 25%, which is another 20 units, it doesn't take a lot with the number of homes that are getting built that over 5 years. That's 300 times 4, it's 1,200 single-family homes. That's, we got that. So is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. The problem is it just means, you know, and it gets back to another element of this is, you know, if we're going to build or we're going to want to have built 300 units that fit this, we have we've gotten to the next spot, how much do we really want to grow? You know, now we got 300 more units because we see this need. Well, yeah, we might have a lot more other units.
Here's where I'm going to step in for a moment and just ask for other opinions on this. Yep.
Okay.
I got it.
I don't think the growth is gonna stop, ever. I mean, we might not want it, but it's not stopping. That's obvious if you've been to any of our plan commissions or village board meetings. We're growing like crazy.
Okay, let me throw in a variable here because I want to get some other voices in here. The variable is, so you have in the comprehensive plan a limit to growth, but there's been a certain type of growth.
Right.
And one of the things you're proposing right here is to shift where that growth is happening.
Right.
Okay, so just keep that in mind, that you're saying instead of building, I believe you would call it a planned development, you would be building those developments that are mixed income or specific for rental. Go ahead.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay. I'm watching you because your body language is telling me you would like to speak.
I will. I'm
Okay.
trying to take in everybody. It's kind
Okay.
of my style. Everybody, you've been to a lot of board meetings. I let everybody else talk first
Okay.
before I give out, so I'm just taking in. I'm thinking along the lines of, as Jeff talks about his troubles of getting people, Mary's comment about now hiring signs. We're growing. We've all heard we're potentially going to have grocery stores. Maybe stores, maybe a store. We don't know that yet. But each store is going to be 250 employees.
Yeah.
The restaurant that's going in is going to be another 70, 75 employees. Where do they come from? Generally, the employees that are in those industries are going to be like $12 to $15 an hour workers. So I'm listening to all this. I'm also thinking of the big picture of the ramifications of what we're trying to undertake here. Right now, we have this zone of 90 homes a year that we're building in the community. Those are not affordable for most people. Okay, but they're affordable for the 90 that are coming, frankly, within that. That tax base is one thing.
Chris, why are you saying 90?
That's what we've had.
That's
For
historic.
single family. Yes, over the last 10 years, we're right around 90.
You're averaging 90?
90 homes a year. That's correct. Okay, so if we change that, and I asked some people yesterday this question, if we took in designated territory that we were going to put 500 homes and we were going to say the homes costs were going to be $250,000, how long would it take for those lots and those homes to be sold? In Waunakee.
Hopefully you wouldn't do that.
Well, I'm just using it for
I don't
you,
think
see?
it would take any longer to sell those homes as what it does to sell a $500,000
No, I'm
house.
saying they would all be sold.
They don't.
Right, they'd all be
Right.
sold.
They'd be
Absolutely.
gone.
It'd be,
It would be gone right away. And where I'm going with it is, where we're at right now, we have this much growth. If we put and open up that, you're going to see an extreme growth right away. So we have to somehow figure out how we can layer that in. Because if you have 500 homes that go in, what space does that take up? A lot of extra territory and real estate, which is what farmland generally that we're going at. So we would have to take up a lot of our farmland space right around the community to get that done. Because we can't go back right now and take the houses that are all there and say, well, we're going to reduce their prices.
Yeah, but from everything that we've learned,
We're
Chris,
in the plan.
you don't want to do $250,000 homes all in one area. That
I'm just
gives
saying
you
if you
pockets
have
of
that
poverty, and everything we learned is not what we want to do.
It's an example.
I'm trying to give an example of what we have here. So we're trying, how do we modify it to say, let's stay in the 100 zone, but maybe we need to have 20 to 30 of those be in that price range.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at.
Oh, okay.
Where I'm going is, but even 20 to 30, the amount of employees we're going to need doesn't match that.
Right.
So that's where our issue comes in, and then we flip to apartments. And I don't know if he said it or not, but Middleton, does anybody know what the housing difference is for Middleton as far as what's apartments and such versus single-family
It's in
homes?
one of those documents.
60% in Middleton is
60-40.
It's 60-40 for 40 single-family homes. 60. We are 75-25, and we're not even probably there. We're probably closer to 80-20 right now, even with what we've added with our apartments that we are. So that's been a decision that we've also taken down, and that's part of our comprehensive plan, in our comprehensive plan. What that number has served us very well. as if we do have an influx, that all of a sudden we do have 200 to 300 homes plus apartments coming in, our infrastructure needs change as well because there's so many more people. Our police, our public works, all of the village functions have to come in as a result of that. In addition to our schools, there's a higher influx into our schools, so we have that ramification. You look at Sun Prairie, they went like that with everything, and what are they having for referendums for schools every year? With big referendums on that.
They put in 2 brand new elementary schools in 1 year.
In addition to all the public services that have to be provided. So, Waunakee, we're a little bit different from the rest of the Madison market, as far as I'm concerned. We have a place that people want to come to, and that causes us to have expensive housing.
You get the how. These are the things that were piercing my brain.
Excuse me, I need this.
We're just talking about the number.
I know. But she was saying, why am I, and
That's why.
I'm thinking that number, 300.
I will say in the city of Middleton that their in-house planners often lament the fact that they don't have a lot of single-family areas. They don't have a lot of single-family lots. They're just not. They don't have that. Bishop's Bay has like the part of Bishop's Bay that was improved. It's full. And to get to the next spot, it's all you talked about. All the infrastructure, and all has to be paid for by someone. This is like 4 buildings. Come on.
Thank you for bringing that. That's really important. The infrastructure. We've heard single-family homes and we've heard large apartment complex, and I want to remind you, we haven't talked about all different types of development, but I want to remind you of the speakers last month who also talked about a fourplex and 20-unit apartments and things like
Hey, now
that.
we're breaking your own rule. You asked us to
Thank you for catching me. You're right. I will back up and keep you guys going.
I started.
I've been doing some research on missing middle housing. And for instance, this is just an example. It may not be the best example, but it's something I came across. Okay, you look at the area that they wanted to do for the big housing development that did not go in. And I don't know how many units they wanted to take down to do that, but it was quite an area. So these are examples. I don't have any facts. But if you have an area that you want to take down 60 units that are middle-class housing or lower-income housing, to put up a 100-unit building at, 60 of the units being market value and 40 units being lower income, then what happens is you've already lost housing for lower income people. So some of the ways of changing that is perhaps instead of having a great big huge development, you take those lots when people want to sell, and you do smaller projects, usually using smaller, not smaller developers, but developers who have smaller companies, and let them use local workforce, and the money stays in your area. It may not happen as fast as a 100-unit apartment building, but I can see something to that, because then you're keeping finances in town, you're doing it a little bit slower, but you're not losing the affordable housing that you have. Another possibility, to do that though, you have to change zoning. You can't put a fourplex up where it's single unit zoning. So that's a thing. You have to change the zoning and perhaps waive impact, like park impact fees, or the cost per permitting, to lower the fees to give people incentives to want to do the projects. Another possibility is to change zoning to put in mother-in-law houses, or to put above garage apartments, so that when, let's say that I have a ranch style home. When I was first married, if I knew what I know now, which I didn't, I could have perhaps put in a mother-in-law's home, and then maybe got a little bit of rent for it until my children started college and wanted to be more independent, and they could live there. And then as I get older, one of my children could move into the house, and I could move into the one-bedroom mother-in-law place.
These could be some of these.
But that's what I'm saying. So that's one way of thinking outside the box.
Right.
Do we have somebody from Dane County talk to us about that? No, we didn't, because they're, they just revised their zoning code, and they added a lot in there for rural communities, which is interesting, about adding mother-in-law, grandma and grandpa's suites, and even separate, they're calling them accessory residential uses. And I kind of talked to a couple people there, and thought I gave them Kristen's name, but maybe not.
Pardon?
I thought, we're talking about you.
Were you?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
I talked to a couple people about it.
She was one of them that would have been involved, and Brian Stanley did some work with it.
They're pushing it right now and trying to get Fannie Mae to accept them.
And I don't know if Waunakee would accept that, but that's an option to build some of these.
So what I'm saying is, instead of just looking at, necessarily what we've been looking at, we really have to look outside the box.
Great. You called me on how, jumping to how, and we are all like moving toward the how.
It's hard.
So it's hard not to. So we've got like a proposal here, right? And we've recognized that it's an ambitious proposal because of the need, because there's a gap, and because of future growth and employment needs. And we're going to leave it as, this is a proposal with concerns that were brought up, but we're going to migrate. This whole group's going to migrate. And I'm going to ask if anyone who feels the willingness to move this table, just scooch it here.
Let's
so
lift it though,
I have a
because
question.
that other noise just drove me crazy.
Oh, watch out, there's a chair there.
The rental units that are in the.
That's John. With that baby right?
Not the ones that are being built, as I understand it. These are the numbers that were presented last month.
Okay, so
So
that
those-
includes the ones on Main Street.
Are those built and occupied before 2019? Kristen?
Yes.
Do you know if those would have made it into the American Community Survey?
If
The new ones on Main Street, if that number would reflect the apartments, they would
it
not?
was 2017.
2017, okay, so no, they're not in there yet. So, and were those affordable?
No,
No.
they're
Okay, so
luxury.
then
They're
they're luxury,
luxury.
so this is not talking about luxury, this is talking about, all right. Now you guys are scared, right, because I called on you. But this is really small print relative to where you're standing, so I want everyone to come on in close.
Available for people with.
Okay, so last session, while you were listening to the speakers, I asked you to fill out those response sheets, and then I took those response sheets, we consolidated all of the responses that were legible enough to decipher, and that's the caveat, there were a few that we could not decipher. And we made a big list, and then I tried to sort them. So you might not agree with my sorting, and I may have some that are missing. We also took some of the ideas that came in previous sessions. But we came up with policy options, and these are, what are ways that policy could be changed or utilized to make it more feasible to build affordable housing. We came up with financing options, and this isn't like what a developer does, but to the extent possible, how could the village support these kind of various financing options? And you guys suggested all sorts of development options, and these are the ones, Neela, you were just talking about comes under development options. In fact, both of these you mentioned. So these were all things that came up on your response sheets, came up in previous conversations. And what we're going to do, and then that's just like some other considerations. This is going to be a multi-part exercise. And I'm going to describe the exercise, and then I'm going to let you do the first part, and then I'll keep describing it. The first part is you guys all look through these, read through them, think about what's missing, write down on the chart, and I'll put up more paper, write down what's missing, things that you would like us to consider. Okay, so I'm sure they're not all right. If you see a mistake, just take your pen and fix it, right? Or make an elaboration, add to it. We want the whole range of policy, financing, and development options that this task force should consider. After we do that, I handed out those dots. just a real quick poll based on not any criteria at all, but based on what you think are the most feasible, the most necessary options, and I'm going to have everyone vote, and I'll tell you how to do that when we get there. And then we're going to divide up into 3 groups and have you go to whatever group you're most interested in and start writing what you think the recommendation should be.
I have one question. But create a housing authority like that at the Forest in Sauk City, I don't think know what that is. I can't remember.
Okay, then just whoever wrote it, come by and write a quick description of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what it is either, so if you wrote something, I got an idea. If you have a question about it, put a question mark.
Okay.
And then if you know the answer, put the answer down.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to let everyone go to it. I'm going to put up extra sheets of paper so that we can have
So just reading and writing at this
reading
point.
and writing, creative
No
brainstorming.
dots.
No dots.
No dots yet.
No dots.
No dots yet.
If we're writing what we think is missing.
Exactly. Or you're elaborating if you think I didn't get it right. Right?
Or explaining what the housing authority is.
Right.
Never
right.
say that.
Leave this blank on the left-hand side.
Okay, leave that listen.
I'll put up more paper, but this is your chance, and you can talk to each other. This is okay to talk to each other. I think I've heard a couple comments.
That just got on the video.
Let's see, how's it go? If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. Twice I tricked you guys.
I didn't clap.
All right, excellent. I've heard a couple comments that the visual helps to see where people are leaning, but we're going to take this to the next step. The outcome that we're looking for is a list of recommendations that the task force will make to the village, to the board, and saying, we, the task force, have studied this issue, we've thought about all the variables, and these are the recommendations that we are putting forward for the village to pursue in order to increase the availability of affordable housing. So, we've separated them out, and what I'm going to ask you to do now is take these and to make them a little bit more precise, a little bit more, give them a little bit more teeth. Sort of like a policy recommendation or a strategy recommendation. So for instance, here's one that got a lot of votes. So it says, develop an ongoing committee of the village that includes a plan commission and housing task force members to continue addressing long-term affordable homeownership rental options. You might want to take that and combine it with something like this one, create a housing authority or a workforce housing committee that reviews it. So you might want to just put a little bit more ideas behind it.
Why?
Why? Because we want to, these were just rough ideas that were thrown out. It's an opportunity for you to talk about it a little bit more and to tease the real guts of it out of it. What do you really want to tell these guys? What do you want to tell the village, the village board that they should do and why? This one actually is pretty good wording because I stole it from Middleton. But some of the others aren't worded so well. Lower impact fees. You might want to consider something more precise. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to self-divide into 3 groups, which I know that many of you would like to be in all 3 groups at once, but we don't have that ability to do that. So if you're really interested in these ideas that came up in the development options, I'm going to have you sit, let's say right back there, okay? If you're really interested in these policy options that came up, I'm going to have you sit here in this group of 2 tables. And if you're really interested in these financing, I'm going to have you pull these 2 tables together and sit here. And then I'm going to have one person be a facilitator and another be a scribe to write down right on that chart what you're talking about.
What's here?
I didn't hear what you said. I don't think I did.
What's here?
And you've done someplace else, but it's right.
Right.
Chris who? Oh, Chris. Well, he's the boss.
We have approximately 8 minutes, and You all might say, no, please let us stay an extra 5 or an extra 10. You just have to beg a little and we'll do that. But what I'd like to do is have a real quick report out from each table of what changes you made, what things your group got excited about, and then I'll tell you how we'll proceed with this exercise. So you guys are ready, right?
Sure.
Okay.
We elaborated and combined a lot of the bullets for the development ideas. First one being mixed styles within neighborhoods, so suggesting, encouraging, requiring this. Do you want to use your example?
Yeah, I was just bringing up in other cities or villages, sometimes there will be a new development that goes in with apartment complexes first next to the major roadway, and then it'll change to townhouses, duplexes, and then it'll go to like maybe a park or something, then single family homes. And these are in Dane County. I've seen them in DeForest, Mount Horeb, Fitchburg, and those developments seem to still sell, really quickly, and I think they're pretty attractive going into as well.
And we added co-location of commercial or residential to that bullet point, and continue to plan complete neighborhoods with amenities, sidewalks, parks. And then another idea was the village puts together a plan, and then we can send this out to developers or have some sort of guideline of what we're looking for, including information from this or the public so that it's easier to go through, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then encouraging smaller lots for redevelopment. The example that we've heard a couple times about the Kilkenny streets over smaller lots, or your downtown example, do you want to explain that?
That is, if you have a larger lot that is single family, you would have to change zoning, but to perhaps put, if it's a big corner lot, you could put in some taller townhouses or perhaps a fourplex. That way you're utilizing the space to the best of its ability and getting more units that way.
And I encourage or requesting green building or solar, making costs continually more accessible for people, so less of their income is going to their housing. Explore projects with smaller medium developers like co-op, co-housing, duplex condos. Less restrictive development within redevelopment. We have new ideas or making it easier for people to do that, and then combining smaller projects around town for the affordable tax programs, or how can we do that? That was an example from one meeting. Lots of things. Anyone else? Okay, good, cool.
Very good, thank you, good job. Thanks for going first. You guys ready?
Sure.
Okay.
We didn't have to change very much on ours. It was pretty simple. So financing options, the majority of the red dots were on village works with developer and or lenders to pursue a variety of housing loans, credits, low-income housing tax credit, LHTC, TIF and Federal Home Loan Bank to reduce debt load on housing development, WIDA Section 42, USDA rural housing we aren't eligible for in Waunakee, so we scratched that off of there, and then bank financing. Then we had explore options for village purchase, site land in order to have some control over the housing that is developed, and create a land trust that owns land. Cost of developing housing would include land rent but would not require land purchase. And for the village to consider down payment assistance for affordable home ownership. Was the main thing that we took off of here. Did I miss one? I feel like I missed one. Oh yeah, link TIF funding requirement the developer commit to a percentage of affordable housing and handicap, disabled, etc. Nice. You had one at the end there that we didn't break down yet.
I forgot
It was with the solar.
Oh, yeah, catalog all of the external grants and programs and federal programs that make housing affordable, ranging from down payment assistance to grants to improve existing homes.
Give them a good marker to write on that.
You don't want writing.
Okay, good job. Thank you. Policy.
Sure. So we did 5 of them. The first one is develop an ongoing committee of the village that includes plan commission and housing task force members to continue addressing long-term affordable homeownership, rental options, and housing goals, and reviews all new residential developments. And then require a range of housing affordability options in the same development, mixed incomes with a range of housing types. And then create a housing department staff to review housing options and affordability in the village, and that person could actually work with the committee, we thought.
They could help catalog.
And then require a percentage age of units in certain apartments be set aside as workforce housing, such as for teachers, firefighters, public workers, for those in the community. Develop incentives, lower fees, smaller units, location, etc. And then one more we did was reduce restrictiveness of new development covenants, e.g. parking requirements, lot size, house size, etc. Restrictions add to cost. Developers need to be held accountable, so incentives are passed on to the residents and not just kept for profit.
Give yourselves all a hand. Where do we go with this? We had a suggestion that there's a number of people who are absent and that we give them an opportunity to provide some feedback, but I also think that this conversation was just a start. So what we would like to do, and tell me if you think this is a good idea, if it doesn't work, we'll try something else, is put together a survey, like use a Qualtrics survey, and capture all of this and the numbers up there, and then send that out to all members of the task force to provide additional feedback, to do additional work at wordsmithing or ranking priorities. We'll play around with the survey, and it gives you all a chance to reflect, to go back to some of the documents that you've collected and read, and to really give serious consideration. If you have a survey in front of you, you can think about it a little bit longer.
So you're typing these up is what you're telling us?
We'll put them onto onto a survey tool. Yeah, they'll be typed up.
And is it going to be like an open-ended survey where we're not just choosing one over the other? We can add comments and stuff, or just?
Yep.
Yeah, we'll allow a ranking, so like
Yeah.
going through a test score or something, and then comments.
Well, does it need to be restrictive? I mean, we don't have a number that we have to say can only be 10 or.
No, but like you rate this idea on a scale of 1 to 10, and then we can give like a numerical ranking.
Sure.
Not like a forced ranking, yeah.
Qualtrics, if you have 2 or more open-ended questions, they'll flag you and they'll say this is a bad survey, but we'll do it anyhow. We'll have lots and lots of open-ended questions so that you can provide feedback. And then, because we're getting close to May and June, and there's still a lot to do, Kristen's going to take the first stab at looking over those survey results and what we've got here and putting it into a draft, something of a draft recommendation report. And if all goes well, have that in your hands a week before the next meeting. Ha, that's you.
It's me. It's me.
I did not volunteer myself. So I'll write the survey.
All right, cool.
Sound okay? Okay.
So we should put in our calendars for the next 2 months for meeting on the same time frame, so May and June. And then from there, we're done, or do we, I'm just trying to think.
We're not sure, we're waiting for the boss to tell us what.
So for sure, that's for May and June, we're meeting as
So
usual.
That's correct,
So May
isn't it?
9th, right?
Yeah.
And are we going to have one more night where we have an extra hour for the week or the day we missed in February? We made up 1 hour last month. Are we going to make that hour up also, or
It's a great idea.
is it just going to be lost?
That's a really good idea because we could use an extra hour today.
Yeah.
we could put out the proposal of the May meeting being an extra hour. There's going to be a lot of work to do. Okay, we'll check in with Todd if that's a,
It's up to the committee. I'm sure the meeting's available.
And that's May 9th.
Can I just see how many of you would be okay with that idea of an extra hour to wrap up? Okay. Here's the other piece, though, that we need to think about, is that we're getting a sense of the community and a sense of community desires through the survey. It's one tool. Does this committee feel that there should be some other opportunity for community input to present what your recommendations to the community, to have some conversation and feedback from the community before it goes to the village board? I would just want to hear some opinions about that.
I think just from watching how the village board functions, that it would be a good idea to take it to the village, and then if there's the beginning of some action that goes along with that, having some open public meetings where some of this stuff is explained and talked about, and a genesis is given of how it got here, and then listen to what people have to say. I know that that may sound a little bit backwards, but I think that that's part of the reason that this group was put together, to do that as a task, to bring it to the board, and then the board will have to do something with it, and that's, I think, when the public can really get involved. They're already involved with the survey. They know we're talking about this. They know that it's been going on for a while, and I think a bigger question is, where do we go from here once June comes and goes? Is one of the first things that's going to happen is a more permanent committee that looks at this. And so I think that that's, at least in my mind, that's kind of how it's working.
And I also think that if people have taken the time to take the survey or whatever, they might like just some feedback and know where to put a frame of reference, like just what you gave us, those numbers on the small amount was very illuminating.
I'm a little bit confused about our charter also.
Go ahead, you start and then we'll go.
Go ahead.
I'm concerned about our charter, because if our charter was by the village board, I think we would owe it to the village board to talk about our recommendations with them first, and then if we're commissioned or requested to say, go get some more community involvement, then have all of us stand up and sit on in front of a committee or community meeting and be able to talk about how we got to this spot. But it feels like we have some obligation to the village board to tell them first and not go to the community first. That's my
yeah, I'm absolutely fine now. The only question I had, and maybe it was a misunderstanding, I usually understand things. I thought we were making our recommendation to the Plan Commission, and the Plan Commission was going to review this before and tweak it or look at it or do whatever they wanted to do with it before it went to the village board. And I'm kind of looking at the three village board here. And it seemed to me that if we make a recommendation as a task force to the Plan Commission that's set with planning, policies in the village, and if they look at them and say, these look good, let's go to the public, that's their decision whether they want to have a public hearing or however they want to handle it. But it seems to me that I was thinking our report goes to the Plan Commission, the Plan Commission digests it, do what they want to do with it, and they make a recommendation to the village board if they want to adopt it.
I think that's right.
Yeah, thank you.
You're right.
So I know it happened in the beginning, and I almost pulled somebody aside and said, I think we're going to the Plan Commission first, because I think that makes
That's
more
my
sense.
mistake.
It's okay.
I knew I was making it too.
But I think in that situation, that Plan Commission can take our input, which is what we're supposed to do, and then they can decide, let's take this and have a public hearing or take public comment or however they want to do it. Maybe have a big dog and pony show and invite us all for coffee and donuts and however they want to do it, and that can create. We can go to the chamber, and Ellen can present how important this was to all the businesses. To go to Rotary. Todd likes going to Rotary and talking about things. But that's up to the plan commission, I think, to decide. I don't know.
Good point.
Okay. And so this whole sheet here that has things like work on political buy-in, educate the public, engage in discussion with developers is down the road, right? We haven't even gotten to this point where we discuss this.
I think so.
Well, wouldn't that also go into, if there's another committee formed, permanent committee at the village level, those people would also help facilitate that?
Well, yeah, also when Kristen puts together the document, I think that you need to include those as, you know, by the way, plan commission, we also suggest these things about this plan. You need to come up with it. If you want us to do something, send it back to us and we'll tell you what to do, we'll help you buy in, or form this other longer-term committee to do these things. But those are all really great suggestions, but I think they get passed on in the report. That's just me.
And passed on to that other committee. Other comments on the community input piece? Okay. It is time to adjourn.
Motion?
I'll make it. I'll second it.
Second by Tom. Did you say that, Tom?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I said.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
I do want to say, anyone who has suggestions, things we're missing, if you're thinking we're walking out of this meeting and we're moving forward fast, and you want to make a suggestion, please email us and let us know.